Alright, so, CRPGs, huh? My first foray into the genre was Divinity Original Sin 2, and what a way for me to start. Definitely setting myself up for a life of disappointment. Not like that was happening already. But among the games I have tried after and left quite the impression on me are the Shadowrun titles by harebrained schemes, namely Returns, Dragonfall and Hong Kong. Only I didn't know the order, so I simply clicked on the first one that popped up. Hong Kong, the last in the series. Strike 2, one would say, more disappointments to come. So my original playthroughs, as it turns out, are largely the same as the more modern ones. First, talking about Returns. Largely there is nothing terribly wrong with the game, but the problem here is that the developer was either inexperienced or simply unaware of what worked and what didn't. Namely the combat system. A game like that juggles combat and story well, a little bit of one and then a little bit of the other, offering side content and exploration optionally, without harming the experience if it's ignored. Returns was completely linear with basically no side content, and the only difference being tied to what stats the player picks, which sometimes might help bypass some problem differently, like an immersive sim, but bare bones. So my impression was that it was just a bit of a mess of a game. Just underbaked, simple as that. And I do stand by that nowadays. But I have realized that the game as a whole wasn't as bad as I have remembered it. Honestly, up until the graveyard scene, the Shadowrun Returns plays out pretty damn well. Solid pacing, solid story, and enjoyable enough variety. It's just that whatever came after that is not a pleasant experience, to say the least. Especially the last level. I strongly advise figuring out how to enable console and cheating through that whole thing. So yeah, that soured me the rest of the game for me. In addition, I was never really sure what exactly I'd have for team. Like, Jack Armitage seemed like an important part of the story at first, but he's really barely in it. Game feels more awkward when the player doesn't know what is going to be available to them. Thankfully, after that the games got solid teams. Dragonfall. A step in the right direction in every respect. The story is a lot less linear, with optional runs, a lot of optional dialogue and choices to be made. Companions also have their own quests and can unlock some unique quirks. Sadly, though, the game still needed work. For example, a lot of the time, the problem comes up, like a password on a locked door. And the player doesn't have hacking, but someone on the team does. Can they use that? Nope. But then sometimes it actually does work. Some challenges can be bypassed by the companions, but it's completely inconsistent. Same with the inventory. If it's full, everything goes to the stash. Meanwhile, companions could be empty. It's especially annoying when playing a rigger. Drones have their own inventory, and the only way to put anything in there is if the player goes around looting everything in combat with a drone instead of fighting. That is obviously silly as hell. In addition, I've ran into problems with the difficulty. The way it seems to be designed is that the game has normal values. That's what it is balanced around. But the higher difficulty simply applies accuracy modifiers to the enemy and the player. So on the highest difficulty I've had 4 characters and a drone and a spirit, shooting a single enemy guy over and over and over again for multiple turns and failing to bring him down or do anything worthwhile. In my initial impression, I've simply played on baby difficulty and did not know this, but upon coming back, I was extremely frustrated, especially because difficulty cannot be changed after the beginning, and the opening scene can be quite lengthy, especially after coming back and having to talk to the same people over and over. One particular tidbit I do have to mention and praise is the companions. Having personal, entirely optional conversations is wonderful. Staple of CRPGs, but it's still something I would like to praise. Especially when it comes to Glory. In all of the Shadowrun games, Glory remains a highlight for me. Others have their moments, but as a whole, she stands head and shoulders above the rest in Dragonfall. So overall, I've had a much more enjoyable experience with Dragonfall than I did with Returns. But both in the past and now, it feels just not as good as it could be. Which is when Hong Kong comes in. Improved simply in every single respect over Dragonfall and remains my favorite. It already was, and it still is. In fact, I feel like I grow to appreciate it more over time. I didn't realize just how much I like it back when I first started out. It's basically my second favorite CRPG after Divinity Original Sin 2, of course. Companions are probably the biggest highlight of Dragonfall and honestly in all of the CRPGs. They are always able to lend a hand with challenges, sometimes offering personal insight into situations as well, and having their own stories and missions, with Reactor probably being my absolute favorite. There's just something about a messed up Russian what speaks to me. I wonder what it could be. Difficulty is one more thing to point out, meaning the game seems to be actually carefully balanced this time, making sure there are no unfair accuracy issues. However, it also means that if a player knows what they are doing, the whole game becomes a cakewalk, especially the end. The last boss is a downright joke. Oh, and I almost forgot this. Hacking was also changed. Every game changes hacking a little bit. Returns presents it as just... well, it's just a combat. Dragonfall sometimes makes more optional paths, but it's still just combat. But Hong Kong turns it into a bit of a stealth game. You can still combat through, but it's a lot more interesting, a lot more fun when it's presented as a puzzle with stealth in it. Anyway, regardless, the story, the pacing, the balance between the main story and optional content, all of it is as good as it gets. And I will never I will never stop hoping for more games like it. I do recall mentioning it before, but I'd like to point it out again. Hong Kong stands strong as a good example of having the perfect grasp of the scope, meaning the developer knew how much they can pull off and how much to cut. Because, of course, more could be done. Take the movement system from Divinity or even Baldur's Gate 3. The ability to sneak, to jump on top of walls, collapse floors like that spider den as Baldur's, or set up elaborate traps with barrels and surfaces, or even push people off cliffs, as well as ways to pin people against each other. These games are a lot more complex, even if they are in the exact same genre. But that means budget, and that means a lot more development time. Shadowrun works without it just fine. And that's something I wish a lot more people would learn. Hell, even Larian themselves. Nobody disputes that Fort Joy and Reaper's Ghosts are amazing, unforgettable experiences. But the Nameless Isle? After being hyped up for so long, that's all it is? Honestly, even Arcs. Even after rigorous patching, both of those feel subpar in comparison to the first two acts. To say nothing about that stupid puppet fight. Good lord, I will never stop hating that stupid puppet fight at the end. Good lord, that was so bad. Clearly good pacing is hard to manage. And when the scope gets this huge, it becomes that much more difficult to juggle it all. But anyway, that's a tangent. Shadowrun games still remain near and dear to my heart. I think at this point I'll just keep them forever available on my hard drive, to replay them once in a while, just like a lot of people do with Bloodlines or Deus Ex. And that's really as high as a praise as I can manage.